considered ordinance number 210466, which is on the docket for first reading.
If there's no objection, the clerk will call the ordinance and read the ordinance title.
The ordinance number is 210466, amending the annual budget of the city for fiscal year 2021-22, adopted in committee substitute for ordinance number 210159, in accordance with state direction as to the funding of Kansas City Police Department, appropriating $42,282,444 to the Community Services and Prevention account. Designate requisition authority, directing the city clerk to send a copy of this ordinance to the Board of Police Commissioners of Kansas City, Missouri, and recognize this ordinance as having an accelerated effective date.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the charter requirement for reading of ordinance number 210466 on 3 separate days be waived, that the ordinance be advanced for final reading and consideration this time.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councilman Fowler.
Mr. Mayor, honorable members of this council, I find out about this today about 11:45. And now we're going to move to try to adopt a $42 or $46 million cut in the police department budget without it being vetted, without it being publicized, without input from 4 of us, at least, on this ordinance. This is wrong. We talk about transparency in government. This is not transparency in government. To run this through is transparency, is government in the dark. I will not support advancing this. I doubt I will support it when it comes before council, hopefully after it's been vetted and we've had some time to just talk about it. What we're trying to do is run through something that we have no way of knowing how we're going to spend $42 million. Is it going to go to law enforcement? Is it going to go to some other community program that somebody links to law enforcement, reduction in crime? I have no idea. This is wrong. I can't support this.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Councilwoman Lohr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been down here. This is my 14th year down here. This is the worst piece of legislation I've ever seen down here. The worst, by far. The 4 of us had no idea this was happening. We learned 30 minutes before the press conference to release it. This obviously was done in secret, so transparency's out the door. You all want local control of your police department. What, just local for just a few of you, and the rest of us no? I don't understand. We are a body representing a city. We are elected by the people of this city to take care of it. I don't understand what the world you were thinking to do such a thing and defund the police department by $42 million and put it in another fund for community and preventative services. Well, you know what? What that means is a reduction in police officers on this street. So that makes this city unsafe for our children and our families. So the next murder is on your heads.
How did you know I was going to stand up? Well, I am very disappointed because so many times we all sit here and when it meets our needs, whether it's mine or any one of my colleagues, we say, oh my gosh, I hate same-day adoptions. It's so unfortunate that people try to ram things through without us even having an opportunity to do it. And if it's mine, all of a sudden it's a bad thing. But if it's yours, it's okay. And I guess I think we need to have some equity in this city on consistent behavior because it depends on who you are, whether it's okay to do a same day or not. And I don't think that's fair because if I remember correctly, each one of us were elected by people. And so it doesn't mean my election was less valuable than one of your others. So that's very frustrating to me, especially given the fact that I'm on the Finance Committee, and I would have assumed that had we let this go through the proper process, this would have landed in the Finance Committee where we could have discussed it as a body. And I guess my question is, what are we afraid of? What are we hiding? And why aren't we willing to have an actual, intelligent discussion about this if we are so uncomfortable with it? So a few questions I have are, well, first of all, I'm totally against it, and I will not support it in any fashion at this point. I'm not going to support talking about it. I'm not going to support where it is because we're trying to ram something through that people haven't had a chance to see, or at least the people that I've talked to haven't had a chance to see it. But I would just want to say a few things for those of you who don't know what's in this ordinance. It's kind of like the whole Hillary Clinton. I'm voting for it, and then I get to read it. I don't want to vote for something until I've had a chance to read it. But a couple weeks ago, Councilwoman Park Shaw was talking to our police in our business session, asking them to give us explanations on how we're working with our Office of Citizen Complaints and how important it is for us to be able to have a valuable discussion on that. Well, Well, we're with this ordinance, and if you all vote for this today, you're saying $6.9 million of community complaint investigations is going away. That's a big number, and because most of those citizen complaints are not happening on North Patrol or Shoal Creek Patrol, they're happening in East Zone, and they're happening in Metro, and they're happening in Central Patrol. And so, thank you, where I don't live. So that's unfortunate, and that hurts the people that we most want to protect. The other thing is, we're cutting, according to this ordinance, $8.2 million in Metro Patrol Division. We're cutting $9.7 million in the Central Patrol Division. We're cutting $4 million in the East Patrol Division. These are critical issues that we need to help for the most and highest majority of crime in our city. And that's a problem for me. And then the other two numbers that I think are interesting is $800,000 in the crime lab. That's something that I remember last term, actually most of my colleagues that were in the first term, all of us were there celebrating together the new Leon Jordan Crime Lab. I believe we all went to that opening together, but now all of a sudden we just want to cut $800,000 of its benefit, and I think that's surprising. I would think we'd want to do that. And then finally, I guess I would say, well, a couple other things. One thing I didn't notice on here, Mr. Mayor, are your two police officers who protect you day in and day out. They're not being cut. So we want to be protected by them, but yet we don't want to fund them. The optics are bad, and they don't make sense to me. I don't understand why we'd want ask these people to protect us and then not fund them so they can therefore protect us. That's very frustrating to me, and it's disingenuous at best. And that is something I don't appreciate. And so I guess I would continue to say to my colleagues, number one, until we have time to discuss this and really understand why the numbers came from where the numbers came from, and maybe all of you know about it, I don't know, but it feels like it was really quick because, like I said, I received a phone call at about 11:40 today acknowledging this, and I was in meetings all day, so I didn't even get to see it until after 12:15, and it's 3-something, well, 4:30 now, and I'm a fast reader, but I'm not that fast, and I didn't get time to ask anybody questions or understand why they're doing what they're doing. So for those reasons, I feel like I'm on Shark Tank. I'm going to be voting, I'm a no. So thank you. It is Shark Tank, actually. It feels exactly like that. So, no.
If there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Ellington,
This is a motion to consider the bill, right?
To consider it.
This is a procedural motion.
Aye.
Robinson. Aye. Shields.
Aye.
Bunch.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
Parkshaw.
Aye.
Boo.
Aye.
McManus.
Aye.
O'Neill.
No. Sorry.
Hall.
No.
Laura.
Absolutely not.
Fowler.
No.
Lucas.
Aye.
9 ayes, 4 nays.
The motion passes. The ordinance. Hold on. There's no. There are like 40 minutes left. The ordinance is now before council. Is there any discussion on the ordinance? Councilman Ellington.
Yeah, to briefly speak in favor of the ordinance. And I would like to start off with us versus them. And this is a problem in politics. So I'm going to say it again just so we actually have an embedment of where we're starting out. Us versus them. When we talk about law enforcement, the conversation is broken down to us versus them. And if you find yourself understanding in which position you are in, are you them or you us, that is problematic because we're talking about a public safety entity. In relation to the budget reservations, I don't look at this legislation as anything that is punitive against law enforcement. I look at it as a way of us actually justifying a policy conversation and then fiscal responsibility from elected officials, not necessarily a us versus them. When you look around the audience, you only see 2 black officers, and I happen to know both of them. One of them I was arrested by, and I'm actually cool with him right now. I was arrested by him when I was 19 or 20. Went to court, had a fight with him the whole 9, and then we joked about it when I got elected to the city council. Why is that important? It's important because people that are law enforcement officers are actually individuals that work for and are restricted to policy implications. On a local level, we choose not to engage in any type of policy conversations because of the ostracism or the non-understanding of State Law 84. It should not be us versus them. By allowing the council to go into negotiation processes, we can actually accurately how police reforms and stay 100% inside the scope of the law when it comes to Chapter 84. We're not saying that we want to restrict the budget so we can get rid of all law enforcement officers. We're saying that we want to increase in community policing. And when I talk to most law enforcement officers, they actually understand that. But they don't control the administration process. When we talk about the board, now we're talking about hyperlization of policy, politics, and non-elected officials that dictate policy. When we talk about communities, we're talking about culture. The thing that is most devastating that we don't take account for is proximity. I live in the 3rd district. Most of the crime happens, violent crime happens in the 3rd and the 5th district. Guess where most of the officers live at? Most of the officers live in North Kansas City. Now, this isn't to badger. They do. They don't
No, they live in
off
Kansas
Prospect.
City
North.
North.
Sorry.
Kansas City North, excuse me. They don't live off Prospect. They don't live off Truce. They don't live off 39th Street. There is no community connectivity. When you talk to most of the council folks from the Northland, y'all can point to law enforcement officers that live in your community. That changes the proximity of culture and understanding. And what we're saying is that the scope of observation needs to be bigger than the limitations of your own geographical area. We have an entire city that has been bleeding and requesting police reforms. We have law enforcement officers that have actually been talking about problems in law enforcement. We heard one of the contingent issues about the Office of Community Complaints. Well, if we vividly remember the conversation that we had in business session with the Office of Citizens Complaint, Merrill Bennigan, he actually admitted after several inquiries from myself and Councilwoman Shields that they didn't have the authority to recommend or enforce a recommendation process. This is something that is vital to our citizens. So I would actually encourage all of the council, and I can't talk to the transparency issue because I don't know that, but I'd like to encourage all of the council not to look at it as us versus them, but to look at it as us actually improving law enforcement apparatus in the city. When we had our senators in here and our legislative update from Jeff City, they talked about the residency change. What they didn't talk about was the non-legal codification in the chokehold bill. There is no enforcement in that chokehold bill, none whatsoever. So we give up residency for laws that actually have no mandate in them or no enforcement mechanism in there. Why? Because it's political. Nobody would say that an elected official shouldn't live in the city in which they serve, but we say that's cool for law enforcement because it's political. Nobody would say that an entity that is publicly funded that refuses to negotiate with the entity that they're publicly funded should receive the totality of their funding, except for when we talk about law enforcement. We don't do that with fire. We don't do that with EMT. We don't do that with anybody. So again, I thank the mayor for actually bringing this in front of us. I think this will ultimately improve the standards in the relationship between law enforcement and the city because it would allow us to be more flexible in ensuring that the policy recommendations that we feel and that law enforcement feels is vital, that the board actually mandates to access funding. So when we talk about hiring issues, this can actually fix that. When we talk about civilian review boards, this can actually fix that. When we talk about increasing community police officers, this actually fix that. When we talk about creating a pay scale for law enforcement officers to actually get an increase by the amount of de-escalations, we can do that. Currently, we can't do any of that.
And Councilman, just letting you know.
Man,
I know.
Man, she talked
Just letting you know.
on the procedure about an underlying bill that was irrelevant to the motion. I could have pointed order that and I didn't. So when we talk about this conversation, it's not emotional to me. This is factual. And again, going back to law enforcement, just look around. The diversity is not here. And the last thing I would like to say is, and I believe I'm accurate on this, is one of the wives of law enforcement. I found her comments extremely interesting and slightly encouraging when we had the KC Tenant debate that was online. At the end of the debate, she actually made a comment that, you know, she heard the stories and now she understands and she still didn't want the law enforcement budget to be altered. The only reason I said that is to say this, that if we took our time to have more culturalistically understanding and to stop positioning us versus them, we can actually have law enforcement that is vital and beneficial to the community, and we can have more diversification. Because all of the excuses that we come up with why we can't do it is directly tied to the funding. So again, I encourage the entire council to look past their limited scope of understanding and vote for ultimate transparency, because again, I can't talk to the negotiation factors, but after we pass this, we know that we can say that if you want to access this amount of funding, this is what we expect. That is transparency.
Thank you, Councilman Ellington. Mayor Pro Tem.
Got cut off. I want to continue the thing that he's hitting on because I think it's absolutely correct, is that, you know, DC and Jefferson City, what they want us to think is that this is an us versus them situation, us versus law enforcement, the community versus law enforcement. That's not what this is about. These two ordinances together are actually an invitation for cooperation, an invitation for collaboration. And, you know, I don't like same-day adoptions. I usually don't support them, but I don't see this as an end of the discussion. This is a beginning. It's a change in the way we're doing things, and people don't like change. But, and I get it, change is difficult to accept sometimes, but it's time for us to accept that we do have to make some changes. We have to change the way we do business at City Hall and with the police board and that interaction to have some accountability. I've voted every single year I've been here for more money for police. A lot of people wouldn't want to admit that because they think that's a bad thing. I'm proud of it. I'm proud to support our law enforcement. I'm proud to vote for more increases, and I have an open mind to funding this new academy class and even step increases and these other things that they've come to ask us for through ARP funding. Of course, the issue always is when it's 3, 6, 9 million is what control do we have to make sure that what we're funding actually happens? And the answer is always we have none. And this doesn't actually change that too much. It changes it a little bit in the sense we now can actually have a discussion and perhaps something written down in the form of a contract that is mutually agreed to. This is not control in the sense of this council telling PD what to do. This is about this council being able to have a discussion and an understanding that's written down, just like we have with every other agency that we fund, tens of millions of dollars. In this case, over $200 million. We're talking about 40-some million dollars out of that, less than, around 15% of their overall budget. So this is not even, a substantial majority of it. It's a really relatively small fraction of the overall budget. But the bigger issue is we've got to have some collaboration in this community. The community's begging for it. It's time to have it. And, I support moving this forward because I think it is what that is. It's a beginning. And I think it's time for us to start those conversations.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilman Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm real happy to hear the Mayor Pro Tem explain this because not a word of what he just said is in this ordinance. Not a word of it. All it says is we're cutting $42,282,444 out of the police budget and putting it into community services and a prevention account. It doesn't say how it's going to be used. It doesn't say it's going to be used for law enforcement. It doesn't say it's going to be part of a negotiated deal with the police department. It just says we're taking it out and put it in this account and we're going to use it some other way. This is why I don't like this. We don't know all of this. We haven't heard all of this. It's not written in the ordinance. If you look at the ordinance, it looks like we're taking $6 million out of the Office of Community Police, or the
complaints.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even written right. There's an error in it. They don't get that much to begin with. This shows why this needs daylight. This is not daylight. This is government in the dark. This is government where we don't have the ability to stand in front of the people and say, this is what we really mean, and then amend the ordinance so it says this is what we really mean. This is not the way we should do business here. But unfortunately, it's the way we're going. And I cannot support this. I won't support it.
Sir, Councilwoman Hall.
I just have two things to say. First of all, I guess what is irritating to me is we keep saying we have no control, we have no control, we have no control over the way they spend their budget. But I would just caution us, we have our auditor, he's always sitting in the back of the room. I would ask us to audit their budgets. How do they spend their money? How do we spend our money? I bet we would be surprised to see that they are spending it very judiciously the way that they say they're going to spend it. I've been here 6 years, and in the 6 years I've been here, I've not seen any egregious ways where they've spent money that they didn't ask for when they came to us at a budget time. So I think that's interesting. And the second point I want to make is my colleagues are saying, we need to collaborate, the police need to collaborate, it's not us versus them. Well, what about the collaboration starting at home first with us? Because some of you seem to have a lot more information than what I have. That doesn't seem like collaboration. And, I always say, I'm not willing to do something if I haven't done it first. And I don't ask you to do something if I haven't done it before. And I would say, why are we asking the police and the community to collaborate if you guys won't even help and collaborate with me and talk to me? And we're colleagues. We all work together, not apart. And if that's not even happening at this level here on the council floor, then what's our expectation for other people to do it? So I have a hard time acting about we're being collaborative and transparent when at least a third of the group haven't been involved in the collaboration or the transparency. And I believe that in the spirit of all of that, we should slow this down and send it to committee and let us all hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hall. Councilman Ellington.
Just for Councilman Fowler's edification, I'm not sure if he gives you all the details, but if you look at the corresponding ordinance 210468, I think that gives us a vague enough scope to allow for those negotiations when it talks about community engagement, outreach, prevention, intervention, and other public services. So now we're talking about the mental health aspect, de-escalation aspect. The outreach would actually go to some of the programs that have not been funded to their esteems, and just to go to the conversations and keep it factual. I want to say about 3 weeks now, when we had the POW people in here, they actually talked about how underfunded they was. That would actually go to outreach. And again, we do not have control after we allocate the budget, because then it becomes a policy issue. And that's what we're trying to stop it. Once it becomes a policy issue, we have conflicts with state statute 84. And again, this would give clarity to ensuring that public dollars are dedicated in the exact fashion in which we say.
Thank you, Councilman Ellington. If there's no further discussion on the ordinance, the clerk will call the roll.
Ellington.
Aye.
Robinson. Aye. Shields.
Aye.
Bunch.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
Parkshaw.
Aye.
Boo.
Aye.
McManus.
Aye.
O'Neill.
No.
Hall.
Nay.
Lohr.
No.
Fowler.
No.
Lucas.
Aye.
9 ayes, 4 nays.
The ordinance passes. Mayor Pro Tem.
210468, which is on the docket for first reading.
Second.
No objection. The clerk will read the ordinance title.
The ordinance number is 210468. The title reads as follows: appropriating the sum of $3 million from an unappropriated fund balance of the general fund to the Community Services and Prevention account. Authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Board of Police Commissioners of Kansas City, Missouri, in an amount not to exceed $45,282,444 for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department to provide community engagement, outreach, prevention, intervention, and other public services, including as necessary providing for additional recruit class to facilitate the provision of community services, and recognize this ordinance as having a accelerated effective date.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor, I move the charter requirement for reading of ordinance number 210468 on 3 separate days be waived, and that the ordinance be advanced for final reading and consideration this time.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Ellington.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Shields.
Aye.
Bunch.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
Parkshaw.
Aye.
Boo.
Aye.
McManus.
Aye.
O'Neill.
Aye.
Sorry. Hall.
No.
Lohr.
No.
Fowler.
No.
Lucas.
Aye.
10 ayes, 3 nays.
Motion passed. O'Neill, it's okay. It was just the motion. It's just, so you can vote no on the ordinance. The motion passes. The ordinance is now before council for final consideration. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just note that this is the companion ordinance that actually allocates the funding, and as was noted earlier, this includes $3 million for the new academy class, $45 million that would be authorized pursuant to an agreement negotiated between, authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Board of Police Commissioners for the remainder.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I may speak real quick, and then I'll go to Councilwoman Hall, because there were a number of things that were said before, many of which inaccurate. This ordinance actually is the very answer to the criticism of a cut. And let's be as honest as we possibly can. The City Council, the mayor, are elected by the people of Kansas City. Someone just a moment ago said, if somebody's murdered, well, the blood is on your hands. For those of us who are related to people who've been murdered in this city, for those of us who live close to people who have been murdered in this city, you know what? It's not just yesterday that we started caring about murders. I said earlier today, and I believe it, in my lifetime, I'm tied for the youngest mayor in the history of this city, and 4,467 people have been murdered in this city since 1984. More than the American troops in Afghanistan, more than the American troops in Iraq. And so what are we doing? Let me first of all tell you what we are not doing. In other cities, they have actually cut the budget $30, $40, $50 million. And like the Mayor Pro Tem, I am someone who has voted to increase the police budget every year. I'll admit it too. But we're saying, you know what? We have council members like Councilwoman Robinson and Councilwoman Park Shaw who did a blueprint for violence, a wonderful presentation. Where was the collaboration with them after they talked to us for hours about what they were trying to do? Lots of this council reaches out to the department all the time about ways that they can collaborate more. So you know what folks said? Let's have $47 million out of a $240 million budget where we just get to say, hey, maybe you'll talk to us about priorities on prevention. Maybe you can talk to us about ensuring that if you say we'll get a new class, we actually get it. And as someone, Councilman Barnes made this point before, and it's absolutely right, every year that I was on the city council, they'd say we need new folks, we'd vote yes, and then next year they'd say we need more new folks, or maybe they're not here or anything of the sort. I didn't understand it. Well, I think this is one way it can be clear and simple. And for those who say this is incredibly surprising, I ask you to rewind 1 hour in this meeting when KCATA had a $60 million budget. A $60 million item that we passed with almost no discussion today. We don't know where KCATA is doing any number of things. We don't actually have control of KCATA, but at least we get the chance to see their contract. And what happens? Their director comes in, he talks to us, we get to ask questions, we get to say something about bus service in Kansas City. Indeed, Councilwoman Lauren made the point there aren't enough bus stops in her part of the city, so she can share that with the director too. This is not defund, and if you're saying that, then you're trying to play the divisive politics at issue that do happen in too many other places. This is actually increased fund. And trust me, we're getting hit for that too. This increases funding for a recruiting class that I heard just a day ago was exceedingly important. All we want to know is that we'll actually do it if we fund $3 million extra for it. This actually increases the police budget over what it is in the adopted budget for the city of Kansas City. So I don't want to go too long. All I'll say is this. This is just about accountability. This is just about us, and we all get asked that, and maybe you don't in your districts. When I was 3rd District at large, there was not a single community meeting where people didn't say, Councilman Lucas, what are you doing about violent crime in our city? And you know what? I get kind of tired of saying, well, you know, I voted on the budget back in March, and I'll follow up and ask some more questions for it. So maybe this is just one little step so we can tell that person at the 3rd District meeting, at the 1st District meeting, at any other thing, you know what, maybe we know a little bit more. This is what we are elected to do because we are elected officials. This is not some huge debate. It is not chicanery. And I remind you, because many of you agree with me on that vote, we had a city manager vote not that long ago where in some ways the sides kind of shifted. And I had a lot of folks who said, well, you know, wait a second, we're feeling left out from this process. We don't know enough. We want more collaboration. What did we do? We voted. We hired a city manager. I think we hired a damn good one. Well, maybe in this situation, even though you may not be in the majority on it, this is not some sort of nefarious thing. This is a thing where we can just say, hey, we're doing our jobs. I respect our police department. I like our police department. You can say no, you don't, but you don't know who I am, okay? I grew up, actually, the only man who was like an inspiration in my life, and you know I don't know my father, was a police officer. So you can shrug all you want. I know you were in Jefferson City saying this city isn't responsible. I didn't actually have some sort of thing about all types of things relating to that. So you know what? We do like this police department. We want to work with this police department. But we want to make sure that actually what we're saying and what we do and what we're actually representing to the public is respected. That is all that we're saying. And I would actually reframe the question of, what are you scared of? You're saying, what are we scared of? Why are you scared of the people of Kansas City? They send us here. They can send us out of here. This is what accountability means. You can vote out a mayor, you can vote out a councilman, you can get rid of this whole group. And we see that all the time. And so what I would say is this is fundamentally accountability at 1/5 of the budget. There is not a challenge to that. And I would think that if we actually respect ourselves and our voters, then we can proceed with that in a normal way. Councilwoman Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, what's frustrating to me is we keep talking about accountability. We keep talking about being transparent. But again, I go back to many of us did not even know these were happening until today. And if this is something that is so great and it's such a collaboration and we have so much respect for the police department, how come you didn't bring this before the board? You're on the board of police commissioners. How come they haven't had a conversation with you about this, or the chief? I don't even think they know about this yet. So my question is, how is this supposed to be collaborative and supportive and helpful to them if they don't even know they're a part of the helping to make the solution happen? So that's confusing to me. And then the other
I can
part
answer,
is,
and if you want, and then we can come back.
No,
Because I received a
thought
call.
you just said,
I received a call from a member of the Board of Police Commissioners who dropped F-bombs, said I was destroying my life, and all these other kind of colorful things. We do collaborate. And actually, right, we've collaborated in the sense that we said, hey, can you give us a budget cut, 11% estimate with every other department. And this Board of Police Commissioners sent back a fully funded budget without a cut or anything of that sort. I mean, it's not that we don't actually collaborate. It's just that often it is ignored, and often it is minimized and marginalized. And so we're just saying, if you want to collaborate, let's actually do it in some sort of fair way. I'm sorry, I'll go back.
that's okay. And I understand how you feel, because I feel the same way sometimes, very marginalized and unlistened to. The thing that I am concerned about, yes, I've been a broken record for the last 3 weeks. I have said, fund the academy, fund the academy, fund the academy class. I've said it till I'm blue in the face, and every week Mr. Kowalski from the finance department says, sorry, according to the paperwork it doesn't appear it's fundable. And it's every week, it's been on this little fancy chart in finance committee, and it always has a no by it every single week. Today, miraculously, it has a yes beside it. My question is, did he just find out of the 150 pages all of a sudden that now it's allowable? Or is this just some sort of a way to make it be allowable to make this more palatable for us, because we're getting a $3 million, I got a $3 million treat to get an academy class, but, oh, by the way, we're cutting $46 million. So my question to my colleagues is, great, we give them the money to fund an academy class in June, and oh, by the way, all those academy recruits that graduate are going to now have to go to Belton or Raymore because the police department has no funding to add new police officers to their budget. So I don't know if this is, to me this is a lose, not a win. And so I'm very uncomfortable with understanding how we can fund an academy class, but yet then we're going to cut $46 million, which is staffing, and where are those people going to come from? So I don't understand that.
I will just briefly answer the question. The same $3 million to pay for to pay for a new class is unrestricted fund balance that we have used before for mid-year increases, for step increases, for new classes in the past. You have introduced ordinances that look to use the same type of method to fund a class. This is unrestricted fund balance, unrelated to American Relief Plan funds, and so therefore that's where the $3 million is from. It's just there. We will take the money out, give it to the police department, and they will be able to do with that what they will, except, right, we'll have to actually negotiate out a contract to guarantee that the officers indeed are hired. Councilman.
Now the money says, though, it's coming from the relief plan. So that's where my question is.
This is not relief plan.
Yeah.
This,
if maybe it isn't, but isn't it interesting how just today it's a yes, where for the last 3 weeks it's been no, it's not been allowable, and now all of a sudden it's allowable? And we're not going to take it out of the relief funds. You're going to take it out of unrestricted funds. Why wouldn't you take it out of this if this is yes?
there are many reasons to use fund balance, but I think that's tangential to the conversation
I don't
here.
think so. I think it's
Councilman Fowler.
complementary to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, a couple of things. Mr. Mayor, you pointed to ordinance number 210423, $60 million to KCATA that passed today without any comment. Yeah, it did, but it went through Finance, Governance, and Public Safety Committee where it was vetted, and it was held on the docket for a week or two because others had comments. That's government. That's transparent government. You talked about the hiring of our city manager, who I agree with you is a very good hire, but the poor guy sat out there for an hour and a half and 2 hours in a public meeting where he was questioned. The public could see everything that went on, as with all the other candidates. That's transparent government. To come up with something like this, we say we're going to enter into a contract, but there's no real specificity as to what it's going to be used for other than broad categorizations and a cut to a budget. That is not transparent government. I'm for transparent government. I want this to be vetted. I want us to all have input on it, have a better understanding how this is going to work. And right now, we don't have that.
Further discussion on this ordinance. Councilwoman Shields.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with my colleague, Mr. McManus, that this action today, if the council does adopt this resolution as we just did the other one, it's the starting point for the discussions. It's very clear in this ordinance that this money is set aside into a fund where the city manager can negotiate a contract or separate contracts with who? The Kansas City, Missouri Police Department and their Board of Commissioners. It doesn't give him authority to spend that money anywhere else than as the fruit of discussions with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Board. And so this is the beginning. If this goes forward today, this is the beginning of actually having substantive talks with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department about how a small percentage, as we said, I think less than 15% of their budget will be spent. The rest of it, they have. They had it the day we passed the budget. They still have it. Frankly, I would assume that they would go forward spending that other $20 million they have doing police work in Kansas City, Missouri. And that in fact, even if they never got this money, which is not going to happen, they would not get it until the end of the fiscal year. So this gives us time. This gives our city manager time to work with the police board to come up with a contract on this $47 million and how it'll be spent and what sort of reporting we expect back so we know that it's been spent as we discussed. As far as the recruitment class, in fact, that could be an immediate separate contract. I haven't talked to anybody on this council who doesn't think we should have a new recruitment class. Now, we're in disagreement as to whether they need an additional $3 million to fund it or whether they really already had that money, but all of us wanted to see it happen. And because we all wanted to see it happen, in good faith, we put in an additional $3 million above what we are sequestering so that could happen. We don't have to have an argument over whether they have the money or not. We're providing an additional $3 million for that to happen. And so I think, the whole thing, today is the first day of the rest of your life. I'm hoping that today is the first day of the development and continuation of a positive relationship with our Kansas City, Missouri Police, with the Kansas City, Missouri Board of Commissioners, and with our citizens so that we don't get caught in silos of, oh, I know better than anybody else what ought to be happening. We need more citizen input. We need an opportunity for citizens to be heard where after they're heard and it's investigated, any recommendation just falls into a dark hole. And if the chief wants to follow it, he follows it. And if he doesn't want to follow it, he doesn't follow it. So again, I think this vote is significant. I think it is very positive, and I am very happy to be voting yes today.
Councilwoman Robinson. Thank you, Councilwoman Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm standing to say that I am in support of this, specifically because of the accountability factor. And we spend a lot of our taxpayer dollars on policing, and my constituents are expecting to have a conversation about accountability. Again, this does set a standard for us to collaborate better and more. Right now, we cannot continue in this environment and in this relationship where my colleague Brandon Ellington said it best, it's us versus them, and we're at this friction point. We have to have a functional relationship with the police, and that means that we both have to be willing to come to the table, sharing accountabilities for the outcomes that our citizens are expecting of us, and be willing to do that together and unified. This does not reduce the money of the police. It actually increases funding for police, as I read it. I had a conversation with the police officer 2 weeks ago, and in a public meeting, this officer shared that we need more police. And the reason why we have so much crime is because we need more police. And I was the only person that was representing the council in the city in an official capacity in this meeting, and they said, you know, I watch Channel 2, and I see the conversations about not supporting this police from a financial perspective. And after the meeting, I pulled the police officer aside and explained to them our funding mechanisms and accountability. And they said, well, you know what? The council needs to make sure that if you give additional money to the police, that contractually they're bound to hire more officers with that money. And so this gives us an opportunity to do just that. And I welcome this opportunity again for us to have a functional, productive, healthy relationship with police, as my district depends on policing and public safety at a disproportionate amount. And I want to represent their interests as best as I possibly can, and these measures do that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Robinson. Is there any further discussion on the ordinance? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Ellington.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Shields.
Aye.
Bunch.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
Parkshaw.
Aye.
Boo.
Aye.
McManus.
Aye.
O'Neill.
No.
Hall.
Nay.
Laura. Fowler.
No.
Lucas.
Aye.
9 ayes, 4 nays.
Ordinance passes.